I'm here.
Morning, Venerable Gyelse.
Good morning, Venerable Utpala. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We're happy to have you here with us for exciting and intense course on how to think clearly, right? Basically, how to think clearly. And Venerable Utpala and I are teaching this course together. We'll take turns. I'll do one class, she'll do the next class. And then maybe just for a treat, we'll do a class together or part of a class together. So I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, know Venerable Utpala. She is one of our translators, our only female translator. No,
Shopping?
that's not true anymore, is it?
No?
Right? She was our first female translator. And she began translating when the program started, which was back in 2017, right? And she has studied and practiced Buddhist philosophy. I mean, we've known each other for at least 20 years, if not more. I haven't counted. We've lived together, we've studied together, we've taught together, and we've had fun together. And she has been studying both philosophy, the Buddhist philosophy, how to live the Buddhist philosophy, Tibetan language, and meditation since 1995. So I think you can count on her having some knowledge and wisdom and shared experience in this path that we're on. We also completed a 3-year retreat together, which this is the 10th anniversary of us coming out of that retreat. And the first translation that she worked on with Geshe Michael, I saw yesterday a photo of what the printed copy is going to look like. And it's going to be printed fairly soon, from what I understand. And the book is all about emptiness meditations. It's like how to meditate on the lack of a self nature to things. And it was written by the Tibetan author Chuni Lama Drapa Shedrup. It was published as an ebook in 2022. And I think it was just offered recently that you could get the hard copy for a discounted price from Diamond Cutter Press. I don't know if that discount, I think it ended like on Monday or something.
Yeah, it just ended. But I'm going to be doing a retreat at Diamond Mountain
Yes.
for 9 days in January. And I'll get the dates for you. But that's a sneak that preview announcement. Nobody else knows. You're the first to know.
So that's really exciting that, she's been studying it for all these years and will be taking us through some of it because it's a big book and introducing us to different meditations we can do so that we can have the direct perception of emptiness as well. So this is very exciting. And so with that introduction, for those of you who didn't know her or didn't know all of these facts about her, I just want to welcome you again. And I'm so excited to teach this course with you.
I am as well to teach with you.
I feel totally not, well, I'm up to the task
Of
of
course you are.
teaching the course, but I feel like it's not my strongest element, logic. And so that's my disclaimer at the beginning here. And that's one of the reasons I'm very honored to teach this course with Venerable Utpala. And with that said, I have taught it several times. I did the course myself 3 times because I lost or the homework got destroyed twice. And so I had to redo it. Obviously, there was some karma in there, right? To try and get it in a little more. And so I hope to be able to make it accessible to you. And every time I teach it, it becomes clearer and clearer to me. And preparing it also helps. So, with that, without further ado, let me share. So I'll be teaching the odd number classes, and Venerable Utpala will be teaching the even number classes. So I'm starting us off this morning. Oops, not quite ready to share yet. Hold on. Let's see, cancel share. Where is it's hiding? What's going on this morning?
Shinto
Shinto.
very hidden.
Yeah. It's not showing up on my share. Um, Please be patient with me. For some reason. Okay, let's try
If you
this.
want, you can send me, I can show.
Thank you. I think I'll get it in a moment here.
Good.
It's just when I open my PPT, I can no longer see the window to share it with. This is the problem.
You have it opened in full screen?
I do.
Maybe get it out of full screen first.
Yeah, when I do that, it just shows me the whole PPT.
Well, then you can share and then quickly go into
Okay,
maybe.
Yeah. Hold on. Okay. Let me try this now. Okay,
We
let's
can all
try.
think about our motivation for doing the course. Oh, yay.
How's that? What do you
There it
see?
is.
Perfect.
What do you see?
Offering the mandala. Oh,
Yay.
now we see your notes.
Oh, that's not what I want you to see.
I didn't think so.
Okay. So We're going to start every class with imagining what a pure world looks like. And then thinking about after we've created that pure world, which I think each of us will have our own pictures of what that looks like. Then we'll do a prayer, of taking shelter and or refuge, and also remembering why we're here. So even though we're saying certain words, if you can have simultaneously in your mind and heart why you're taking this course, to serve all beings, right? That will give you so many seeds and so much energy to be able to understand these deep things that we're going to be talking about. So let us begin. Here is the great earth, filled with the smell of incense, covered with a blanket of flowers. The great mountain, the four continents, wearing a jewel of the sun and moon. In my mind, I make them the paradise of a Buddha and offer it all to you. By this deed, may every living being experience the pure world. Sashi Puki Jukshing Metok Cham Rirab Lingji Nyende Genpadi Sange Shingdu Mikte Urwargi Drokun Namdak Shingla Chuparsho Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I achieve enlightenment. By the power of the goodness that I do in giving and the rest, may I reach Buddhahood for the sake of every living being. Sangye Chudang Soke Chuknam La Changshu Pardu Dakni Kyatsu Chi Daki Jinso Ki Pe Sunam Ki Jola Penchir Sangye Drupar Sho. So the art of reasoning, ACI 13, or how to think clearly, we are going to be studying a subject called pramana, or sema, or logic. Three different words in different languages that mean different things. And I recommend that you take notes. I also want to say that maybe our classes will go on a little longer sometimes because there's usually a lot to cover, and some classes are more jam-packed than other classes. And I think that's my advice for the beginning here. Venerable Utpala, do you have anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, I think taking notes is really, really a smart idea because the readings can be very challenging.
So that's, when Venerable Utpala and I studied this, yes, there was a whiteboard with things written on it. At least when I studied it, and you were able to take notes. We didn't have computers back then, and months and months later, we did have audio available to us after the first class. You guys are really fortunate that media has expanded. And by personally taking notes, at least for me, I know it gets into me much deeper. I understand it more. There's something about the connection between the hand and the brain that assists us in contemplating and making these connections between what we're hearing, seeing, and writing or typing down. So why study Buddhist logic? This is what this first class is all about. So class 1 is why study the art of reasoning, why study Buddhist logic. Class 2. So also in each class in this course, there are like 3 elements. There are 3 parts. The first part is the content of Buddhist logic. The second is the format or structure of Buddhist logic. And the third is debating, teaching you how to debate. So the form of Buddhist debating. So every class will be covering those 3 elements. So now you could maybe understand why it's so full and abundant. So in class 1, formal logic, the content is why do we study the art of reasoning? And then for the, the format or the structure, we're going to talk about the definition of a reason. And then for debate, we're going to talk about the motivation to debate. What is your motivation to debate? And how do you start? Right? In class 2, how do we divide and classify all existing things? Venerable Utpala's first class on Thursday, we're going to study the topic, of how do you divide and classify all existing things in the universe. The debate part will be how do you stand when you're debating? How do you place your foot, and how do you use your rosary and things like that. Quality and characteristics, class 3, Chi Chedrak. One of my favorite subjects, I think. It really got my mind working when I first studied Chi Chedrak. And if you want to see emptiness directly, this is an incredibly powerful tool that you can study. How do we see things? Right? How do we do that? How do we make mental images? And how do we confuse those mental images with things, with objects? The mental image of a glass and the object. What's going on there? The formal logic will be the ideas of similar cases and dissimilar cases. The debating part will be about how to give your answers. So there's like a flow chart. The person you're debating makes a statement, and all you can say is yes, no, it doesn't follow. So there's only certain answers you can give. And as you learn to work with this format, if you frame the questions clearly and correctly, you have to reach the truth of something, of whatever it is you're debating. And that is the whole point of debating. It's not to, be the one who wins. The winner is all of us, right? The winner is all of us. So the best thing to do, and there is a debate element in this class, right, is to pick any question you're confused about and take it to somebody else or a group of people and try and figure out what you're not understanding. Class 4 is about cause and effect. Here we'll start talking about a syllogism. So what are the different parts of a syllogism? What is a syllogism, right? So we'll be talking about all of that. The debating. So at this point in the debate lesson, there's a really nice thing called a telnger, right? Somebody says, emptiness is just a black hole or a black space or just blackness that you put your mind on. And you're like, well, I guess you could perceive emptiness, and you do perceive emptiness every time you close your eyes, right? That's called the telnger. In Sanskrit, it's called a prasangika, which you may have heard of, Madhyamika prasangika. And what it means is it's a sarcastic statement. And it's used as a method for seeing emptiness. It has this special ability to help you to see emptiness when somebody is a bit sarcastic with you, because it makes you think about what you've said, what you're thinking, what you're perceiving. Right? And this is the highest school way of thinking about emptiness. And that's the school of Lama Tsongkhapa, of Arya Nagarjuna, of Geshe Michael, right? So that's what we'll be studying in cause and effect. Class 5, mind and their objects or its objects. So the subject mind and the objects of the mind is what we're studying here. So some people say when you see the emptiness, the mind who's seeing emptiness and the emptiness that it sees somehow melt into each other. So as we study this basic subject in the logic text, hopefully you will get an idea why this isn't true, why this isn't so. So for the logic part, we're going to study different kinds of good reasons. There are 3 types. In class 5, we will study the first type. And then for debating, we're going to learn how to answer a telnger, a sarcastic question. Class 6, negatives and positives. Right? there are different kinds of negative statements. There's different ways to define negative and positive, and it's very important. Why? There are different schools of Buddhism, and even in Tibet, there were different schools of Buddhism. Each define emptiness in a different way. And some of those ways are mistaken ways. Like, emptiness is a black hole. Emptiness, according to the Madhyamika Prasangika, the school of Arya Nagarjuna, Tsongkhapa, Geshe Michael, emptiness is an absence of something, right? But some school says emptiness means the self-existent thing, right? Some schools say emptiness is a self-existent thing which never existed, never will, and doesn't now. So a lot of schools say other things which are completely wrong. So we study this subject so that we never fall into that trap ourselves. So it's an important thing to know. And each subject you study has some kind of importance for understanding the higher schools more refined understanding of emptiness. So then from there, we go on to class 7, the idea of contradiction and relationship. What does it mean for two things to be connected or related to each other? And what does it mean for two things to be the opposite of each other? Right? That's also a relationship. So we'll study the logical statements which are used to prove the absence of something, because, as I just said, they're used to prove emptiness itself. We're going to study the major reasonings used to prove emptiness, and they all have to do with proving something that is absent, something that's not there. There are two different kinds or two different forms of that kind of logic, and we have to study them. Debate on that night will be debating tactics, how to distract your opponent, how to taunt them, to irritate them properly, how to embarrass them in front of a large group of people, stuff like that. So you're trying to put the pressure on your opponent so that either their mind goes to crazy wild things or that it can focus and really listen to what's going on and work on trying to find the truth of the matter. On to class 8, definitions and how things are defined. So here we define how to define things, right? The logic part of that will be a special kind of proof for something that you can't see. How to prove something you can't see. The absence of something which you can't see. And then class 9, it's called the concept of elimination and perception. And what it means, according to the logic schools, you see what you see when you see something. And when you see something, it's because your mind is pushing out, it's blocking out all the other things which are not it. And I know for me, the biggest example of this is when I go into a large parking lot and I'm looking for my car. And it's like, no, that's not my car. And no, that's not my car. That's a white car. My car is not white. That's not the shape of my car. I'm pushing everything out that's not my car. And some schools in Buddhism believe that that is emptiness. And it's called Shenso. Everybody say Shenso. And it's completely wrong. You have to study all these wrong ideas about emptiness. And one of the reasons to study this is to understand why Shenso is a mistaken idea. And that's important. And you can spend your whole life studying it. But if that's all you ever study, you're never going to see emptiness. So you have to understand why that's wrong. And so we get this great presentation on why it's wrong. And we then have a summary of formal logic up to that point, a summary of everything that we have studied. And in the form of debate, we're going to study what it is that monks debate. And there are about 12 or 13 different classes that they debate on the debate ground at any given time. So you can go from class to class and hear different things being debated. You know, what are the first level students debating? What are the second level students debating? What are the senior students debating? So we're going to find out about those also in class 9. And then for our last class, class 10, is the concept of time itself. How do we perceive time? What is the nature of time? Does the past exist? Does the future exist? Does it affect us in any way? Right? So how do we define time? Why do we perceive a passage of time? And then for formal logic, we're going to discuss bad logic, incorrect logic. In Buddhist logic, if you present an argument to somebody that they already accept, it's an incorrect reason because you can't really discuss it. It's an untrue reason. If you try to argue something with somebody that they already accept, then the reason you give is false according to Buddhism. If you try to give a reason to someone which they can't already accept, but they just haven't like connected it together yet, that's also untrue logic in Buddhism. So what we need to do, what our job to do is to be able to discuss Buddhism with other people, just normal people. Of course, we start with discussing it with people who are studying it together. That's our beginning place, but it's so that we can discuss it with our parents, with our neighbors, with our friends who aren't Buddhists, right? So the rules of Buddhist logic require that the person accepts everything you say already, but they just haven't tied it together. So you're not allowed to present anything in an argument like talking about future lives with a person who doesn't already accept future lives as a proof. You're only allowed to give or to talk about the things which they already accept. They just haven't connected them together. And that's actually how Western logic also works. So if we go beyond what the other person already accepts, then we've already blown our argument. We've lost them. You know how that is. Somebody goes on about something and you've like, what are they talking about? I just don't get that. And I'm probably not going to agree with them because you've mentioned something that I can't accept yet. So this idea with Buddhist logic is only to use ideas which the other person already accepts and put them together in a new way, which then helps them to see the truth of something that will help them. And then in debate, we're going to talk about a traditional debate year, the rhythm of the debate in the monastery throughout the year. And we're going to celebrate that we made it through ACI 13. So there's a very concise and full description of everything we're going to cover in the next 5 weeks. So here's a picture. It's not a super clear picture. It's cut out from a painting of Gyelse. And Gyelse was one of 2 main disciples of Lama Tsongkhapa. And Lama Tsongkhapa started our lineage, and he was the teacher of the first Dalai Lama. And Gyelse means regent, meaning that he was assigned to replace Lama Tsongkhapa after Lama Tsongkhapa passed from this world. There's a wonderful story that before Lama Tsongkhapa and Gyelse met, Gyelse was the most famous logician in Tibet. He was an incredible logician. And he began to hear about this guy from East Tibet who was making sort of a grand entry, a big production in central Tibet. And people were beginning to come to his classes a lot. So Gyelse, he was really interested and curious about this person. So he thought he would go as the most eminent debater and logician at that time in Tibet and blow Lama Tsongkhapa away. So he heard that Lama Tsongkhapa was teaching outside of Lhasa somewhere, and he put on his debater's robe and his big debater's hat, his pandit's hat, and he started off in the direction of where he had heard Lama Tsongkhapa was teaching. But, he didn't really quite know where he was going, and he's wandering around, and he's in this pasture. And he meets a young lady who is tending cows. And he asks her, excuse me, young woman, do you know where Mr. Big Nose is teaching tonight? They say Lama Tsongkhapa had a very large nose. So do you know where Big Nose is teaching? She says, well, I don't know who you mean by Big Nose. Oh, Gyelse says, you know that guy Tsongkhapa who recently came from the eastern part of the country? She says, no, I don't know. But aren't you Gyelse, the famous logician? He says, yes, I am. And she says, oh, I've always wanted to meet a great logician. And very confidently says, don't worry. I can answer any question about Buddhist logic. She's appearing just as a cow herder. And she points to the cow who's making a cow pie, making a cow poop, right? And she says, I have this question. When they raise their tail and the poop comes out, it's kind of going up. But then when they're done and it falls down, I was wondering which is the top and which is the bottom of the cow pie. Because going out, it's one way, and when it falls down, it's the opposite. Gyelse J is then like, oh, He was stumped. He didn't know what to say. And he took about 10 minutes and he couldn't figure it out. And he's thinking, he's looking up at the sky and looking around him, trying to figure out what the answer is. And he turns around and he looks at her. And suddenly, there is this beautiful goddess blazing with golden light. And she had a stick of incense between her hands, right? And she says, I don't know what you mean about big nose from the east, but if you mean the incomparable, glorious, incredible Geshe Michael, master of the world of Buddhism, he's teaching over there. So that was his introduction to Lama Tsongkhapa. And he said that the best thing Lama Tsongkhapa ever taught him was how to think even more clearly. Okay. So logic, where does it start? It starts with Lord Buddha. He was a master debater. And the sutras are full of stories of him wiping out other schools. And this wasn't a joke at the time of the Buddha. In ancient India, different schools, different religions, different philosophies, they would come together to debate, usually in the court of a king with his ministers around him. And they would debate for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And then the king and his ministers would decide whose arguments had been the most convincing. And if you lost, you had to join the other guy's way of thinking. You had to accept that they had the most concise, clearest way of thinking about whatever it was you had been debating on. So Buddhists sometimes lost too. So the stakes were high, and the stakes were high to be a very good logician. So sometimes they would send in maybe not their best logician, and they would lose, but then they would send in their heavy-duty logicians, right? And then they would win it all back. Like once at Nalanda Monastery, where they sent a lightweight monk out to debate, and he lost, and it looked like they would have to switch over to the other team's way of thinking. They sent in Arya Nagarjuna. And he would win, hands down, no problem. And then they would have to switch to the way he thought. So we're talking, that they debated this way to decide what the best philosophy to follow was up until the 800s or 900s. And the style of meditation that we follow, that was followed in Tibet, was also decided by a debate of that nature. So how did this happen? Master Kamalashila from India, who was representing the Indians, debated with Master Huashang, who was representing the Chinese. And Master Huashang said, at least this is how it was told to me, Master Huashang said, close your eyes and think about nothing. That's how to meditate. So it was this very serious debate and went on for quite some time. And Master Kamalashila, who we have 3 different books on meditation that were written by them, and part of them are in Venerable Utpala's book on how to meditate on emptiness. He wrote, 2 volumes on how to meditate, which is the basis of meditation, called Bhavana Krama, Steps on Meditation. And Master Kamalashila won this debate. So even up to the beginning of Buddhism in Tibet, everything was decided by debating. In the monastery, you start studying Buddhist logic at the age of 12. These young men, you can see, are a bit older than that. You learn to write, you learn to read, and by the age 12, you are thrown into your first Buddhism class. And that's how to debate, how to make a good reason, how to think straight, how to reason well. And you do that for 3 years with your house teacher. So what's your house teacher? They're like your nanny or your babysitter. And he has to teach all the kids, or in the nunnery, she has to teach all the kids how to study, how to learn to write, how to read, how to debate. And when it reaches a certain point, then you're allowed to go and study with the great Geshes and things like that. So for 3 years, you're stuck with your house teacher and you study with them. And Ken Rinpoche, he has great stories about his house teacher and how he tutored him. And they're really sweet stories. At age 15, then, after those 3 years, you're qualified to enter the debates on the debate ground. And the very first thing you study in the monastery is logic, a very simplified logic. So Lopan Chukyi Drakpa, Master Dharmakirti. Lopan is master, Chukyi is Dharma, and Drakpa, Chu is Dharma, and Drakpa, it means famous. So Chukyi Drakpa is his Tibetan name, his Sanskrit name is Master Dharmakirti, and he lived around 650 AD. He is a big founder of Buddhist logic in India. He followed after, or I guess he wasn't the founder, he elucidated, he expanded on an Indian master named Master Dignaga, who was a big founder of Buddhist logic. Master Dignaga passed away before Master Dharmakirti was born. And people started to attack Master Dignaga's presentation of logic. So Master Dharmakirti was like, I am going to come to the rescue. I am going to present Master Dignaga's logic in a way that people aren't going to trash it. And he named his book Semanamdra. And it's a defense of Master Dignaga's ideas. And Sema means valid perception. So what is a valid perception? We are having valid perceptions all day long. Just your normal perceptions. So what is a non-sema? A non-pramana? A non-valid perception? So for me, I used to live in a small town named Bowie with Venerable Utpala. And we used to drive to Diamond Mountain for classes. And so you're on this back road, a country road. And when you drive up to Diamond Mountain, there are pistachio orchards. And especially in the fall, at twilight or in the dark. And because it's a country road, you have to drive it very carefully. There's mice running across the road. There's rabbits running across the road. Sometimes there's cows, black cows sitting in the middle of the road that you can't see till you're very close to them. So an example would be in the autumn, when the light is low and you're driving from Bowie to Diamond Mountain, and the trees are shedding their leaves and they're blowing across the road, and suddenly you see something out of the corner of your eye in your peripheral vision, and you slam on the brakes, thinking that it's a mouse. It happened to me. It happened to me. Because I don't want to kill that mouse. And then you realize it's just a leaf among other leaves. So that is a moment of sema mingilop. Say sema mingilop. A moment of false perception. Right? So this is like an example of taking information that appeared to be correct at that moment. But was it correct? No, it was just a leaf. It wasn't a mouse. So valid perception means given the information I have, it was the best decision I could have made, but it turned out to be wrong. So sama is the study of a valid perception based on what you know. The perception is valid. Is it right? That's another question. So the commentary on valid perception, Pramanavartaka in Sanskrit, Semanamdra in Tibetan. Valid perception here is a code word from Master Dignaga's original work. It's a commentary on the presentation of valid perception according to Master Dignaga. It's written by Master Dharmakirti, like 1,300 years ago. And it's very hard to understand. So we, of course, thank goodness, not of course, thank goodness, have a commentary to explain it. And it's called Riklam. Oh, there's an extra R in there. Sorry, I'll correct that later. Riklam Trulgi Dimuk. Say Riklam Trulgi Dimuk. I should get Utpala to pronounce this. Her Tibetan's much better than mine. And it's called The Key to the Logic Machine. Venerable Utpala, would you pronounce it for us?
Sure. Riklam Trulgi Dimuk.
Thank you. Rik means reasoning or logic. Excuse me, I'm gonna have a drink of water. So the art of reasoning. Lam means path. Trul means machine. Gi is of, and demik means starting key, like the key you use to start your car, right? So the key to the logic machine or the key for starting the logic machine. Purbachok Jampa Sutram Gyatso. And he wrote this commentary. He was from a place called Purbachok. So that's why he has that name at the beginning. And he was the tutor to the 13th Dalai Lama. And without this commentary, we would be lost. And some of us might say, even with this commentary, we're still lost, but it helps us at least, right? So in the winter debates, the monks often spend 4 or 5 days on one page out of a 400-page text. And it takes 15 years to go through it. Nobody ever reaches the 3rd chapters, and there's 4 chapters in it. So Purbachok Jampa Sutram Gyatso, because he was the tutor to the 13th Dalai Lama, he was also known as Yongsen. And Yongsen, that's what that means, is tutor, with a capital T, meaning that he was the teacher of the Dalai Lama. And this commentary is a standard textbook used in modern Tibetan monasteries. Both Sarah J. and Sarah May monasteries use this same book, which is unusual because they have their own textbook writers. So I think it's very cool that it's shared by both monasteries. So we have this commentary, and then we also, of course, have many other commentaries and teachings from other teachers. So there is a quote from the Sakya Pandita Kunga Gyaltsen, who lived 1182 to 1251. So he's from the Sakya tradition, and he was the greatest master of the Sakya teachings that ever lived. And he says, there are 2 kinds of people who study Buddhism. And Lord Maitreya also mentions this. And Sakya Pandita, he says, they can be judged by their level of intellect and spiritual capacity. So he says the first kind of student is Wangtul Tepe Jedran. They have strong faith, or dull faith, rather. They have dull faith. And they follow somebody. So they follow Buddhism with what we call blind faith. And he says that's for those whose minds are not sharp. Wang means power. Tupo means dull, like a dull knife. So Wang tool together is a good word to call your debate opponent. It means like, hey, stupid head. Depa means faith, and Jedrang means to follow someone. So this expression, Wangtul Depa Jedrang, comes from Lord Maitreya, and it means people who follow Buddhism out of blind faith are, as Geshe Michael said, stupid heads. I don't know about using that. I would say people who follow Buddhism blind faith haven't had a chance to really understand why they're following it. Okay? And they follow it maybe because they like the person or the teaching sounds sexy, but they don't really understand them, or other people are doing it, other people are following it, so they feel like they should follow it. And maybe they're thinking, it doesn't really matter what he says or makes sense. He's wearing cool robes and a hat. But you need to evaluate what is said. Because when the times get rough, when you're in trouble, if you just have blind faith, it will break down. It will not serve you. It will not help you. It is just a karmic ripening. So things need to make sense to you. They should be logical. You should chew on them. You should think about them. You should debate them. You have this chance to do that and really pull it apart and understand it. Of course, if there's something you don't understand, we say put it on the shelf. And when it's collected enough dust, bring it down and dust it off. And look at it again with a different state of mind, because you've grown during that time. Your mind has developed during that time. Look at it with a different perspective. The second kind of student is, Venerable Utpala, would you say the Tibetan for us?
Wang Nun, oops.
Yeah.
Wang Nun Rikpe Chedrang.
Wang Nun Rikpe Chedrang. So again, Wang is power. Nun means sharp. Rikpe is reasoning, logic or reasoning, right? Rikpa. Chedrang, again, is to follow that or to follow somebody. To follow because of reasoning is smart for those with sharp power. So don't accept what any teacher says until it makes sense logically to you. Don't run after somebody because they look nice, or they have a nice suit, or they're charismatic, or they speak nicely. You have to think, does what this person say make sense? If it does, after I've examined it, then I'll accept it. That's considered the highest intellect in Buddhism. That's called a person with sharp powers. And that's what we're aiming to be, not just on blind faith. And to be honest with you, I have seen it over and over again. People are attracted to somebody who's very charismatic. And then especially when their teacher does something that shocks them, because they're not able to use logic and they haven't used logic to come to why they practice with this person, why they listen to this person, then everything falls apart. And their life falls apart. And their faith, because it's only blind faith in the teachings and in their teacher, falls apart. And it's very, very sad to see. And it is just a karma. It is a karma shifting. And we have to be very careful with it. And Maitreya says, I didn't write my book for those Wong tools, for those with dull faith. I wrote my book for those Wong noons. So if you want to study my book, you better be a bodhisattva who's a Wong noon, meaning don't accept what I say unless it makes sense. And you know who else said that? Lord Buddha, right? So don't just accept my word for it. Do the 3 tests. So that's the kind of student we want to be. So here's a diagram that if you have this blind faith that's very high and something happens or just karma wears out over time, it just goes downhill. If, though, your wisdom is low and you begin studying logic, then your wisdom grows and your faith, because of that logic, because of that wisdom, gets stronger and stronger. So why study logic? We're back to that question. And as I said, Gyelse said, the kindest thing that Lama Tsongkhapa ever did for me was to teach me more deeply this subject. You know, he could have said Tantra, Madhyamika, everything else. But he didn't. He said logic. And why? It is the key to see emptiness directly. So one, if you learn logic well, you can see emptiness directly. You can prepare by studying Lam Rim, meditating, Lama Yoga, helping your teacher, helping the Dharma, teaching, right? All of those things and more. And then, through having planted the seeds of that good karma of doing those things, if you study these subjects that you're about to hear, it can trigger the direct perception of emptiness. So we want to get ready for these subjects by planting all of those seeds that I mentioned before. And they are famous for triggering triggering the direct perception of emptiness in other people's minds. It just goes off. All the conditions are there. And you might think it's surprising. Logic? Maybe how could that be? You might think it would be the last thing, especially studying mental images, right? Which is essential for understanding emptiness. Chi-Chedra. And that's the first reason to study logic. 2 is to be able to hold the truth of something because you've gone into the logic of it. And 3 is not to judge others, right? So to hold true, which is Tenzin, to go beyond faith, to understand and to analyze the hidden reality of things. So valid perception is seeing directly or using logic to establish the truth of something that we can't see directly. The great Sakya Pandita Kunga Gyaltsen, who we talked about before, he also said the only people who are qualified to keep Buddhism safe in the world are those who understand and can logically prove the truth of Buddhism. So, if you don't study logic well, you won't know what to do to get what you want and to keep these precious teachings in the world. If you can't reason well, if you can't figure out what is a correct explanation of emptiness and what's one that doesn't make sense, if we can't tell the difference, we're destroying the Dharma. So we have to learn to think clearly. So we're learning clear thinking, which is a really good name for logic. We have to learn how to prove something, especially to ourselves. And then Buddhism will stay strong in the world. When Buddhism becomes corrupt in this world, there may still be books and videos and Zoom recordings and PowerPoints and Buddhist teachers. And yet, if we haven't learned to prove something to ourselves and be able then also to communicate that, then Buddhism will still be lost. To survive, it needs people to understand it. It needs people to understand why they believe in something, not just that it feels right, it feels good, it feels right. So if it doesn't make sense to you, don't throw it out, put it on the shelf. If it does make sense to you, just drop all the other new agey things, whatever, that you may have been thinking about. Just go for it and follow it. So what the Sakya Pandita is saying is, if you learn how to prove something or how to disprove something, then you are considered safe. Suppose a person comes to understand the scriptural tradition for how to reason. This art of proving or disproving things, a master like this is a person who keeps the teachings of the totally enlightened Buddhas safe here in the world. And then you have the Tibetan on the right side, and I'm going to again ask Venerable Utpala to read it for us.
Eta truk dang sung chin I rik pe shung luk kang ki she. He pa deni dzok pa I sang ye kini tempanzin.
Thank you. And then not to judge others. Would you read this one too, please?
Such a good one.
I love this one.
Dang tra hoe kansaki tsu sungi kansaki tsu mitsu te nyampar gyartare.
Only I, thank you, only I or someone like me is able to judge another person. No other person should ever judge another, for they will surely fall. So who said this? Venerable Pala said it. Lord Buddha said it. Yeah. Thank you, you guys. I just opened up the chat. Lord Buddha said it. You guys are So right on. So to learn not to judge others, it's a big thing. We do it all the time, or I do. And I can't see what's in somebody else's mind. So we have to be really careful about judging other people. And logic proves that it's illogical to criticize. And this is the last and maybe the most important reason for studying Buddhist logic. And it's an incredibly famous quotation. A logical reason is trying to prove something that you can't normally see. Right? So an example would be like a hell realm. Do you believe in hell? Are you sure that hell exists or doesn't exist? Basically, I think anybody who's on this Zoom call who says, I'm sure it does, or I'm sure it doesn't, is being illogical. Have you seen it? Nor you haven't seen it. Have you seen it or haven't you seen it? Probably neither. So you haven't seen if it exists or doesn't exist. Every quality of every perception is a karmic ripening based on your past deeds. Right? So how do we work with this? We draw some distinctions. Say you see another person beating up somebody. You can judge them to the extent that you should try to stop it. Doesn't mean that you should stand there and say, Buddha said don't judge anybody. Go ahead and beat this guy up. Who knows? You might be a bodhisattva. Who am I to stop you? That's not what it's saying. It's a very heavy duty karma to stop it, a very heavy duty good karma to stop it. At the same time, you reserve judgment about why they are doing it. You do not judge their state of mind. You don't know who anybody is around you. Can you judge their actions? You can, but again, you don't know. Maybe they're doing something special. Maybe what they're doing is going to take effect 100 years from now. I don't know. But remember, based on what I know, based on my valid perception, this action of one person beating on another is wrong, and I have to stop you. But I don't judge you as a person. I don't know who you are. And lots of great yogis do lots of strange things. So it means don't judge other people as people. Judge their actions of whether they're correct or not, or whether you should resist them or not. If they're hurting somebody, you should resist them. Logically, you have to keep something reserved in your mind. What's reserved in your mind? This thought going, I don't really know what's going on here. Maybe something special. Maybe it's just as it's appearing to me from my past karma. But you need to reserve judgment unless you are Naam Drang Drawe, unless you are someone, unless you are me or someone like me, unless you are Lord Buddha or someone like Lord Buddha. You will reach a point on your spiritual path where you can judge them. You don't need to be an enlightened being to read people's minds. It is a high spiritual level. But until then, and don't kid yourself, until then, you can't judge them. So this quote, Geshe was like really curious where this quote came from, this quote from Lord Buddha. And he found it in a collection of stories from the sutras put together by Lord Atisha during Lord Atisha's life. And it's in a story about Lord Buddha telling a former life, talking about a past life of his, zillions of years ago. And in this story, he talks about his life and that before he passes away in that life, he assigns a monk to keep his teachings in the world. And then he passes away. And the story goes that in that lifetime of the monk who he had appointed to carry on his teaching, there was also another monk who was a very, very good monk. This monk had very strict morality, very good meditator, and he opens up a monastery, a small monastery, and he calls all his friends, and they get very good at keeping Vinaya, which are the vows of ordained people. Their monks' discipline, they get very good at meditating. They're following what would be a classical Hinayana lifestyle. And they're staying quietly in the monastery. They're not doing a lot of things. They don't go outside the monastery, except in the morning to beg their food. They meditate a lot. They keep their monks' things to the letter of their vows. And they're making really nice progress like that. And then this other guy shows up, this one that the Buddha had appointed to keep his teachings in the world. And he moves into the monastery with a couple of his followers. And then, after a while, some people from the nearby town start to ask him if he could come and teach them. They say, could you come? We'll give you lunch. And then you can stay and you can teach us something about the Buddhist teachings, what Lord Buddha said. And so, out of compassion, out of his Mahayana heart, he agrees to go. He starts to visit the town more and more, and then most days and most nights, he and his followers are gone. They're teaching the common people Buddhism. They're teaching it to lay people. They're trying to help them because they have a bodhisattva motivation. Well, it creates problems. The first monk starts to judge this newcomer monk. He starts to doubt this newcomer monk's motivation. And he starts to spread rumors that this monk is doing something strange or something improper in town. This is not what monks do. He shouldn't be going to town. He shouldn't be teaching the lay people. He should stay in the monastery and meditate with us and be quiet with us and concentrate on these things here that the Buddha said that we should do. And he starts to spread rumors about monk number 2. So here we have 2 monks. They're both following the Buddha's teachings, right? Eventually, the monk's mission, the second monk in the city, becomes so successful that all of his followers are going every day to the city to teach all the people. And so there's this great movement opening up to teach the lay people who have not had teachings on Buddhism in the same way that they do in the monastery. And it's beginning to form among these normal farmers, business people in the town. And the first time in their lives, they're beginning to understand Buddhism. And everyone is happy. And the monks, well, almost everyone is happy. We'll see. And the monks are going every day. But the other monk is getting more and more jealous and more upset. And finally, he calls a big meeting of the monks. And he says, this is really bad. All these monks are embarrassing us. They're going out in town. They're breaking their vows by doing that. They spend time with the lay people. They're not supposed to do that. They're supposed to be here in the monastery. So they then made a rule in that monastery that no one can go to town except to go begging in the mornings. So for 3 months, the other monk and his followers, out of consideration for the rules, they stay in the monastery. But meanwhile, the people in the town are getting more upset, and all the monks are saying, the monks who used to go, and the monks who didn't, they're going, this is terrible. Now the lay people are upset because the monks aren't going anymore. And it's all because of a misunderstanding. And now it's hurting everybody. So what happens eventually? The second monk moves out. He starts a new monastery. He starts to teach in one city. It spreads to another city and to another city. And it spreads to the state. And it spreads to several states. And then the whole country is practicing these things. And eventually, the whole country is being taught how to become an enlightened being. The other monk is going crazy with jealousy, and he's not happy at all about it. And then the story is that for like 10 billion periods of 10 million years or something like that, this jealous monk was born in the lowest hell. And after that, he did become a monk in a certain Buddhist lifetime, but he lost his robes in every lifetime. And the horrible results were for millions of years for slandering the other monk. And then Buddha says, Naam Dandrawe, Gansiki Tsutsugi, Gansiki Gansaki, Gangsaki, Gansaki, Sumisunte, Nampar Gyurtare. And this is where the quotation comes from. He says, you can't judge other people. You have to be very, very careful about other people's motivations. You don't know who is a bodhisattva. You don't know who is a tantric deity. You don't know who anybody is. And that is the goal of logic. And that is what we learn. And this is the most important lesson probably of Buddhist logic. You don't know who people are around you. So keep your eyes on your own book. Concentrate on your own practice. And then Buddha says, concentrate. Yeah, go home. Don't look around you. You know your own mental afflictions. You've got enough of them. Just deal with those. You don't need to get involved with anybody else's mental afflictions. You know you're not enlightened yet, if you're not. And don't worry about other people's practice. We used to say, don't write in other people's 6 times book. Write in your own. So it's enough trouble just to keep our own lives together. So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't judge their actions. You have to. You must. For your own enlightenment, and what follows on your own enlightenment is getting others enlightened. So here's the punchline, which they never teach you, Geshe says in the monastery. Lord Buddha says, you think that good monk in those days was just anybody? Hey, that was Buddha so-and-so who became enlightened just after that, after he taught all those lay people. And you know, the Bodhisattva who went out among people, that's who he was. You think the guy that went to hell for 1,000,000 years, you think he was just anybody? Do you think the guy who lost his robes for millions of years was just anybody? Well, I got news for you. That was me. Lord Buddha is telling us of his own downfalls before he became a Buddha and all that he had to suffer. So let's take his word that we don't want to suffer like that by judging others. So formal logic, takitsani, the definition of a reason. Tak is a reason, ki is of, tseni is definition. Venerable Utpala, would you read the Tibetan for us again?
Taksukupa.
Anything put forth as a reason. Taksu as a reason, kupa, put forth as something. So if you set up your water bowls or your altar in the morning or clean your house, that's a kupa. You're arranging things. So here in logic, in debate, it's anything put forth as a reason. And the next one. Venerable Upala.
Taksukupa takiteni.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
The definition of a reason is anything I want to give as a reason. So how about, is it right to study Buddhism because the sky is green? Is the green sky a reason? Yeah, it fits the definition. We're not talking about a good reason. So the first thing to study in Buddhist logic is to study the definition of a reason. You may. It doesn't matter whether it exists or not. Everything in the universe is a reason. That's the first thing to learn. And that's what's called a tendril. It's an auspicious beginning to our study of logic. So memorize it. The definition of a reason is anything I want to give as a reason. And then debating. You can see there's active debate going on here with some of our monastics. So rosaries have been used since ancient India. You can see the rosary right here. And every debater has to have a rosary. You wear it on your left wrist. right? It's become kind of fashionable these days to wear a rosary. And you can tell a lot of times who really knows what it means by where and how they are wearing it. And if they're wearing it on the wrong arm, then you know that they have no clue that it's used for debating at all. So if you're wearing your mala on your wrist, it means I'm ready. You want to debate that? I'm ready. I got my mala right here, right? And those hot debaters, those heavy duty debaters, they never take their malas off. You can also use your mala to count, right? You can count your mantras on your mala, right? And it's commonly used in debate. In the debate ground, there's a disciplinarian and an assistant disciplinarian. Usually your classmate is the assistant disciplinarian. And they're allowed to whack people who are not paying attention, who are sleepy, who are getting lazy. And they're allowed to whack them with the mala, right? If he sees somebody come back from the debate ground, if he sees somebody being lazy, he can whack them with it. And in the monastery, if you see somebody come back from the debate ground and they have these dots across their head, you know that they were being lazy or whatever and got whacked by the disciplinarian or the assistant disciplinarian. And Geshe says it's very embarrassing, and it happened to him once. So what happens? In the monastery, they play a drum or a gong to call everyone to the debate ground. You can hear it for 2 kilometers away, and it's called a kanna, a sky drum, and it's huge. And one of the guys gets up there and he goes, bong. And the first time you hear it, you're like, oh, I gotta go. The adrenaline, starts to run in your veins. And then they start ringing it at about 15 minutes before debate starts. So they go gong, bong, and then they start speeding it up. It goes bong, 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 bong. And then, so it just speeds up, and you have to be sitting down in the debate ground when it stops. If you show up late, you get whacked. In the debate ground, everything you prepare has to be inside you. You are not allowed to bring any paper. Everything from memory. Everything must be in your mind. Everything has to be ready in your mind. And you're meant to use things to taunt your opponent. Sharing with you some old photos. So Buddhism, as a belief system, as a worldview, is being challenged here. And we have to know how to answer people's questions. Debate gives you the experience of being questioned constantly, especially when you have to teach other people. You'll have to answer questions and you'll have to be ready. And how can you get ready? Because you've already went through it before, right? You're good at it already. You go to the debate ground at night. Sometimes it's cold. We had, during classes, a debate ground at Diamond Mountain. We had a disciplinarian who would bring cookies and hot chocolate for us. We would be all bundled up and debate in the night outside the temple in the debate ground. And it's lovely. You're debating out under the stars, and you're just trying, you're with your friends and your classmates, and you're trying to get to the truth of something. And sometimes it devolves into just a discussion because you're not so good at debating. Some people were much better than it than others. And at the monastery in the winter debates, when the different colleges get together, they debate all day and all night, sometimes into the wee hours or all night, wee hours of the morning. And the first thing you do when you get there is a thing called kurum. They close the gates to the debate ground, and then you're in there and you sit in this huge circle, everybody, maybe 300 debaters. We were only maybe 50 or something. And in the winter debates, there'll be thousands or 1,200 debaters, and you start the kurum. Kurum are prayers before you debate. And on a typical night, you will spend maybe half an hour to 45 minutes just praying to all of these angels that you have the right motivation for debate. You're not debating for competition. You're not debating to show off. You have come to explore the reality of things with your friends. You'll explore the truth with your friends. You will get to the bottom of truth with your friends. Why? We'll all get enlightened faster. We'll see emptiness faster. And you can help other people faster. If you debate it, it quickly speeds up your direct perception of emptiness. Getting there, right? Quickly after that, you can reach a different kind of body. Quickly after seeing emptiness directly, you can reach a Buddhist body. And remember that the quality of a Buddha, just sitting on their chair, you can appear to every living being in every universe at the same time. You can help them directly because you can read their minds. You can help them with everything they need. So the reason to do all the wimpy little helping that at least I do is that it causes the other thing. It causes the direct perception of emptiness. And that has to be your motivation for debating. This is the purpose of Buddhist logic. If you learn Buddhism well, if you see emptiness directly, you can get very close to a state where you don't have to die. You can understand why all the bad things happen in the world, and you can stop them for yourself. No one can stop them for you, right? You have to do it. So if I practice Buddhism very, very well, I can, in this life, enter another reality. Does that mean you would see me any differently? Probably not. I would still look like a normal person to you, right? With white hair and getting older. But what I'm seeing would be totally idea. We have no idea. Gansaki, Gansaki, Tsuminsu, Nampar, Gyutare. We have no idea. Geshe Michael and the scriptures all claim that if you study this stuff well, and you debate it well, you can become a tantric deity in this lifetime. If you learn Buddhism well, you'll find out that it's true that a person can stop all the suffering in this life, from the smallest lousy thing, like a crack in the sidewalk, up to death itself. You can change death. You can avoid it. You can transform it. And this puts a big responsibility on you. So if what I have shared with you is true, you have the potential to save people's lives. If what I've said to you is true, every person on this Zoom call is a potential teacher to teach other people how to save their lives. We're not talking meditating calmly and staying in your room. We're talking about going to a place where you don't have to die, where you are a different kind of being, a being of light. And you can do that if it's true. So you have this tremendous responsibility. Light a fire under your practice. You don't have time. I don't have time to fool around. People are suffering while I'm fooling around. Right? So that's the only reason we're debating. And that's the motivation you have to have when you debate. It's not a game. It's not something intellectual. It is life or death for you, for me, for other people. The purpose of debate is to quickly get you to see emptiness directly. And it quickly gets you all of your spiritual goals, much quicker than anything else, than any other intellectual way to study Buddhism. There are things that will go on in your mind, that will happen in your mind, that cannot happen when you just sit and read a book. That cannot happen if you just sit and listen to someone teach. When you learn to rip it apart and to figure out what it is you really believe in and what you don't believe, there's no way anybody's going to move you. And that's much better, right? There's no way that's better than debating. And it has to be your motivation. You're saving lives. In your reading, so this all started with your motivation, right? That has to be your motivation. Don't forget the prayers and the motivation. And in your reading, you will find that Geshe Michael wrote out for the first time the whole Kurim. He went to Ken Rinpoche and asked him, where is this? And Ken Rinpoche said, it's never been written down. So Ken Rinpoche helped him, and some other lamas helped him write out the whole Kurim. And so read it there. Sometimes, just read it there. If you're reciting the Kurim and you don't know all the words, there's a special practice, and you go, wah, 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 wah. Maybe you only know the first line of the Heart Sutra, and you just go wah, wah for the rest of it. So remember Kurim. There's a description of it in your reading, and it's very, very powerful. These prayers are powerful. And sometimes they do the Heart Sutra 18 times in a row. I don't know, I've listened to Geshe Michael do the Heart Sutra, and I can't even follow him. He says it so fast. I think that's years of reciting it over and over again. But while reciting it, you're thinking about emptiness through those 18 repetitions. And that's, in fact, Geshe says, why it's the only thing that he memorized well. I don't believe that, but so it's there in your reading. And then your meditation. We've come to the end of class today with a couple of moments to spare, not many, is 15 minutes a day, do an analytical meditation, reviewing specific instances during the last few days when you judged somebody for how they looked, right? Then continue and evaluate whether or not it is possible that they could be a bodhisattva or even a fully enlightened Buddha, and that the true reason for their actions or words could be something very good, which is not apparent to you right now. Cool? And we will end with our own kurim. Dashi Puki Jukshing Meto Chom Virab Mingji Yende Gembadi Sangye Shindu Mikte Urwargi Drupan Nandak Shingla Chuparsho Iram Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniryatayami Gewadi Kewokun Sunam Yeshe Soksokshing Sunam Yeshe Lejungwe Dampar Kuni Toparsho. By the goodness of what we have just done, may all beings complete the collection of merit and wisdom, and thus gain the two ultimate bodies that merit and wisdom make. So thank you, everyone, for hanging in there this morning with me, with us. I apologize for a couple of typos I just caught. I will go back and look at them. Sometimes when you look at something, or when I do, you don't even see them. So I apologize. So there's an intro to logic, a full class, covered a lot of wonderful stories about Lord Buddha and others. And thank you, Venerable Utpala, for reading the Tibetan for us. And
Thank you for teaching, Venerable Gyelse.
Thank you to all of our interpreters and all of our techies. And we couldn't be doing this without you. It makes the world a smaller place. We are able to send out emanations over Zoom. It's very cool. And we'll see you all on Thursday.
I just want to say you can, on the portal, the ACI portal, you'll find materials for this course. I tried to sign up this morning and it wouldn't let me, so I can't give you a link. So, but if you sign in, you'll be able to find the readings and the homework and the quizzes, which will be so beneficial to helping plant the seeds for this material more deeply.
Thank you for reminding people, Venerable Utpala. There will be a PDF of the PowerPoints. You don't get my notes, you just get the pictures and whatever text is on them, so you can use them for your homework. And I hope you have really good notes that you can also use for your homework and study for your quizzes. And we will see you Thursday, same time, different day, for Venerable Utpala's class 2. So have a good rest of your day, evening, whatever it is, and we'll see you in a few days. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Hi, Dinara.